This presentation is on Camp Insignia and Ephemera. It was presented at one of the early Crackle Barrel 8 p.m. Zoom meetings before we started recording them. If you're interested in joining the 8 p.m. Zoom meeting, then you can contact John James Pleasance on Facebook. So there were two different council types in the early days of scouting. There were second-class councils and there were first-class councils. Now, second-class councils meant they did not have a scout executive, where first-class councils did. Second-class councils could become first-class councils if they were to hire a scout executive. So some examples of second-class councils were Durham Council, Raleigh Council, Wilmington Council. Now, those were all upgraded to first-class councils in the mid-20s. And some examples of first-class councils were Greensboro Area Council, Occoneechee Area Council, New Hanover County Council, Cape Fear Area Council. If you notice, the second-class councils in general are considered a smaller area, either one town, one city, or something like that. With everything, there are always exceptions. So Greensboro Area Council in 1918, that being a first-class council, that was pretty exceptional. But you saw most councils go to being first-class councils by the 30s, especially post-World War II. They all basically had paid staff by that point. From 1910 to 1920, there were a couple different types of camps. You had private camps, troop camps, and you had council-owned camps. Private camps and troop camps were the majority. An example of a private camp was Penton, which was actually a YMCA camp from 1915 to 1927, which was an exceptionally long-run camp for that time period. Sometimes the private camps would have patches or some sort of insignia that was issued, and it may have also been issued to non-scouters who attended the camp as well as scouters who may have used the camp under the council. Troop camps usually did not have any sort of insignia that was given out to the boys. It could have just been where certain troops, or one troop in particular, repeatedly had some sort of spot that they camped at during the summer for a series of years, and they called it, like in the photo there, Camp Overlook. So, and it's kind of a cool photo just because that little boy standing up there on the roof is Seymour Johnson, where Seymour Johnson Air Force Base is named for. The brochure there from Camp McDonald is the only item I know of that exists from that camp. You also notice that it was in 1919, which was towards the end of that period. A lot of the councils who had private camps, it was private land that was on loan to the councils. And this kind of goes back into why a lot of the councils were second-class councils, and it's a financial reason is they didn't have money. They didn't have money to hire a scout executive. They didn't have money to buy their own camp because the scouting program was just getting started, that it took time for these councils to develop the funds to expand their program. From 1920 to 30, this is when you really see the program growing. The councils now have more money. They're able to hire scout executives. They are able to develop their own camps, either on land that was loaned to them. There's many examples of land being loaned either from private individuals or from different organizations. Council-owned camps, some examples of those are Tuscarora, that was at Holtz Lake, and from 24 to 25, Ocklawaha, which was at Duke Forest from 27 to 29, and Camp Ottinger, which existed during the 1920s. Now, the size of the camps was much smaller than most of the camps we think of today. If you read through the brochures, you can see various examples of this. From the Camp Tuscarora brochure, there were 2 2-week sessions and 2 1-week sessions, which was only 110 boys total. You did see some camps in the mid to late 20s that were Boy Scout owned, council operated camps start issuing patches. An example is that 1929 Camp Lassiter fell there on the right. Another kind of maybe misconception about summer camp patches, these early issues, is that everyone who went to the camp that year got one. A lot of times these patches are very hard to find, and people don't really understand it because they think of today you might be operating 5 or 6 weeks of summer camp with 100 plus boys in each week. Well, everyone got a patch, right? Well, back in the day, not only were the sessions a lot smaller, but you had had to earn the patches. They were really more of like an honor camper patch. So this is an example from Camp Ottinger, which was in Wiggins Mills near Wilson. And the 1924 article lined all this out. It's very nice to find something like this if you can. A newspaper article that tells you the exact requirements for each patch and what they look like. I don't know of any of these actually in collections, but this is what's described in the newspaper, which is you have a first, a second, and a third year camper patch, and it was awarded after a scout earned 250 points. And then the emblem was meant to be worn on a sweater or a bathing suit. Well, those 250 points would have been earned by, maybe some normal activities such as you're earning your merit badges and things like that, but they also may have had racing or fire building competitions. There were all sorts of things that could go into earning these honor camper patches. The patches were quite hard to earn, and there may have only been a few awarded per week to any scout. Now, from 1930 to 1938, you see a lot of council consolidation. This is when they really started phasing out those councils that were around one town or that town in the surrounding area and started merging them together to create larger councils. So this is also when councils started dating patches. There weren't a whole lot of them that are dated. It's kind of a mixed batch. Of course, as I said, there are always exceptions. You had the Camp Lassiters that were dated in the mid-late 20s. And there were, of course, a lot of patches that were not dated throughout the 30s. There's some great examples on here. The O and the C is from Ocklawaha. The DB is Daniel Boone. The G is Greystone. Then you have the Camp Cherokee. So the patches are primarily felt. A lot of times where you have the felt sewn on to another piece of felt, that's referred to as felt on felt. So it's very common to just have the letters on the patch representing the camp. There weren't a lot of camp medals from North Carolina. You will find camp medals that exist for different camps across the country. They aren't common by any means from any state, but some states use them a lot more than others. There were custom ones like the Pinehurst that was made just for Camp Pinehurst, but a lot of camps also used contest medals, and then they would just engrave on them honor camper from such and such camp, and usually the date, and sometimes they would have contest medals that would actually have been for a contest, so they may say something, X number of points or first place or something on them like that. Then you have the World War II period, which started in 39. So the composite material, I know from dated patches I have, it was used from 39 to 44. As far as I know, that composite material was only used during the World War II period. Some councils made nothing for that period of 39 till the end of the war. Some councils maybe made something for some years and didn't make it for other years. I think there were a lot of restrictions based on what material they had access to. The composite material is a hard, almost like a pressed material. It's not that soft, just the regular felt material that they were using pre-war. So the 1940 Lassiter is an exception to that because it is made on just regular felt. Camp Tuscarora, that had always been issuing felt patches, the 39 is a composite, but in 43 we went from issuing a patch to issuing that leather neckerchief slide. So don't be surprised if you see something a little odd from your local camp for this period of time. Another thing to keep an eye out for are painted belts. During the Great Depression and World War II, these painted belts were used. There were awards painted on the belt instead of making a patch for that. You can see, here's an example. This one's from Daniel Boone Council. It came with a 39, a 40, and a 41 camporee patch. But this is what they probably used for their summer camp program during that war period. And they would have painted on it, these little different totem things would have represented different awards for the camp. I really like this one because it's got, I guess it's the guy's initials. It says CW, I think that's another C, kind of in between the awards. And then he did a white arrow and he put it on there TSALI, which is for Solly, which was their lodge name. So he must have gotten in Solly Lodge around that time period. Just a really cool item for my collection. Another thing that was going on during the World War II period was gas rationing. Now, this meant that some camps, like Camp Charles from East Carolina Council, just closed. They closed from 41 to 49, and they had local council level camporees. And those were very well attended trended and people really liked them. And even today, those patches are very widely collected in their council. Some councils decided to do county level summer camp programs. Here's a ribbon from Stanley County Camp from Moore Mountain State Park. I just think it's a really cool piece. And you can see that it was July 3rd through the 8th, 1944. So during this time period, another issue that was going on in the country, as well as in scouting, was segregation. Mainly from the 1930s till 72 in North Carolina. I can't speak of how late it went in other states, but I know it went till at least 72 in North Carolina. But you had segregated scout camps. Most segregated scout camps came about around that World War II time period. I put some examples here to give you kind of a visual of the timeline. So you had Carlson, they started in 36, James in 42, Howeni in 43, Jones Lake 44, Camp Oak 46. Model Cities was a program that was done, and it was in 72. So it was kind of towards the end. I also put down here two other kind of things that were going on to maybe put these dates in perspective. So in 1941, you had the first executive order on civil rights since Reformation. And in 47, you had Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier. So sometimes councils would use other councils' segregated camp. I know that Cape Fear Council used Camp Carver from Tuscarora in 1962. Old Hickory Council used Camp Carlson and Hugh Greed Scott. Here are two examples of the neckerchiefs. Another thing that we need to talk about are honor camper societies. So you had Cunier from the 20s till the 40s. The symbol of Cunier was the Wahinipe, and it was based out of Cincinnati. It was used all across North Carolina. I know Cape Fear area council used it, Occoneechee used it, Tuscarora used it. Basically a pre-OA honor camper society. In Tuscarora Council, all the Cunier members, when the lodge was formed, the Cunier members became lodge members. The tribe of Pawnee was used by Mecklenburg County Council, and there is a video on the channel if you want to learn a little bit more about it. Croatan Indian Lodge was used in the 30s until about 1940, and that was used by Mecklenburg County Council and Central North Carolina Council, and they selected their members based on a point system, kind of like how the honor camper patches were awarded. There was a segregated honor camping society. I really don't have a lot of information on them. It was called the Camping Campers Clan. It was created when Lodge 70 refused to allow African Americans to join. It was only used by General Green Council. This certificate, which came out of the book Honor Bound, says, "To whom it may concern, because of excellence in camping shown in the 1934 summer camp, Benjamin Poole is elected to the Camping Campers Clan and will receive due award for this recognition." I'm not sure what the due award is, or there's really no more information. That's basically it. But we do know, because of some notes in the book and this information, that African American scouters were using Camp Greystone in the 30s prior to the development of Camp Carlson. From 1946 to 1949, this is post-war period, you have the 44 Tuscarora felt, a 45 Cabarrus felt, a 49 Cherokee felt, and then you found the twills. They went from these pretty felt patches to the twill patches. They all had a cut edge border. In the 1940s, patch manufacturers started using these template designs. So the Camp Tuscarora and the Camp Cherokee Indian heads, you can notice how similar they are. The 45 Cabarrus and the 44 Lassiter, these template designs were very popular, and you'll find examples of them all across the country from different camps. From 1950 to 1960, felt patches were not used as often. They were still in use by some camps. Camp Cherokee, they used felt patches every year. They just look wonderful. A lot of camps went to twill patches. I'm assuming they were cheaper. I don't think they look as good, but they look better than some of the later embroideries, so I guess they're okay. All the patches from 1950 to 1960 that were twill, all the ones I've ever seen have a cut edge border. I can't think of any that have a rolled edge border. When you see a patch with a rolled edge border, it probably means it was made 1960 or later. This is also when camps began producing more items. You start finding neckerchief slides and just all sorts of items that the camps made. Integration also started somewhere in that mid to late 60s period for scout camps, but it really didn't come to fruition until the early 70s. So an interesting final note, a lot of scouts made their own neckerchiefs. They would take some piece of material and they would sew their summer camp patch on them. Here are several examples. Some other ones, like the General Green Council with the camp staff there, that's on a white and black split neckerchief. And there have been multiple examples found. That seems like it was more something that maybe the camp did, or maybe they had, you know, some sort of template, but that seems more kind of like an official staff item as opposed to a mom made it up item. It was very, very uncommon to find silkscreen neckerchiefs pre-1960. They exist, but it's just very uncommon. Now, some of these neckerchiefs that do have just a monocolor with the patch on it or something, they could be staff neckerchiefs, but it's very hard to prove whether or not they are. And that's it. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments. If you have any video ideas you'd like me to do, put it in the comments. Remember to like and subscribe. Thank you all for watching.